and welcome to the Cities on the Frontline speaker series session on leveraging payments and data, public-private collaboration to build a more resilient urban future. I am Luis Bonilla, and I'll be co-hosting the session today, along with my colleague, Nadine Burbar. We are both from the Resilient Cities Network. And before we begin, let me give you a quick introduction to the Cities on the Frontline speaker series session. As many of you know, this is a virtual thought leadership speaker session. We are featuring solutions by cities and for cities. We began in 2020 through a partnership between the Resilient Cities Network and the World Bank. And the series provides city practitioners with a platform for knowledge exchange. This 9th session of the speaker series sessions is hosted with the support of Visa. The intention of this speaker series is to have an open, honest, and safe conversation where we can all learn from experiences. So we request you to please, if you want to cite or quote our panelists, to contact our communications team so you can get the authorization. Also, we have more than 170 registered participants for the call today. So in order to facilitate the session and the exchange, we request to please feel free to put your questions and share your questions and comments in the Q&A box that you have below. So also the recording of the session will be available next week, and you will get all the presentation and information. So I will now hand it over to Nadine to introduce the topic and our panelists. Nadine, please.
Thank you, Luis, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We come back to you again with an exceptional panel talking about leveraging payment data and how that affects public-private collaboration to build a more resilient urban future. We're gathered with a wonderful panel of experts who will share their insights, experiences, and knowledge on this crucial topic. So welcome to this episode. In today's economy, data underpins everything, and urban environments generate large volumes of data, which presents both an opportunity and a challenge to cities. But if utilized appropriately, this data can help cities develop innovative data-driven solutions for these complex challenges. An important source of urban insights can come from payment data, which is collected when people or business make or receive digital or card payments. And when this data is aggregated, it can provide a rich snapshot of behaviors, preferences, macro or microeconomic trends related to specific industries or services. And well-focused data and responsible public and private data collaboration can translate it into improved policymaking for cities, enabling them to adapt their systems to better respond and plan for current shocks and stresses. But before we dive into the heart of this discussion, let me introduce to you our three panelists. We have with us today Tulsi Parida from Visa, Silvina Giano from Buenos Aires, and Dr. Ahmad Giffari from Jakarta. But let me tell you a little bit more about our panelists. Tulsi Parida is the Global Director of Government Data Solutions at Visa, and she brings a decade of experience at the intersection of tech, society, and business with a commitment to reducing digital inequality and promoting responsible and inclusive technology. Silvina Giano is the Tourism Research Manager at the General Directorate of Market Intelligence and Observatory of the Buenos Aires City Council City Tourism Board. She is the representative in the International Network of Sustainable Tourism Observatory for the UN World Tourism Organization. Tulsi and Silvina, welcome. And last but not least, Dr. Ahmad Giffari, who is a Senior Urban Economic Development Planner at the BAPPEDA TKI Jakarta, part of the Jakarta provincial government, and he has over 20 years of experience in urban planning that he would share a little bit with us today. I'm so pleased to have you with us today. I welcome you again to the session, and we look forward to your insights and experiences on this topic. So without further ado, let's embark on this insightful journey, learning from our panelists about the power of payment data and how it's how is it accelerating urban resilience? Now I would like to invite Tulsi to share her presentation, and she will share with us an overview and perspective of data insights and solutions. Please go ahead. Great, we can see your screen. You can go.
Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen yet?
No.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if that's possible. Are you able to see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we can see. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for everybody that's joining in. I know we've got an international panel today, and I'm sure we have attendees coming in from all over as well. So I'm Tulsi Parida, and I work at Visa, and I head our data and advisory solutions for government and public sector globally. So today I was thinking we would spend some time going through a little bit about what Visa does, how we work with government, and how payment insights can help city and local governments understand where they are today and how they might want to create an inclusive and resilient future for tomorrow. So I'll start by giving a little bit of background on Visa. You've all probably heard of us, but we are a trusted network and a world leader in digital payments. So simply put, we enable money movement globally. The chances are, if you've used contactless payments to make a purchase, or you've bought something overseas using a card online, or you've paid a bill, it's Visa's network and technology that have enabled your payment to go through safely and securely. So now you might be wondering about Visa's connections to government and data. So I'm going to share a couple of statistics here. So we process over 192.5 billion transactions per year. So that's $11.6 trillion in annual payments volumes, and we're present across 200 plus countries. And this number is already outdated, but in 2021, we prevented $26 billion in fraud. And so essentially, all of the data that's flowing through our network provides us with insights that have helped us build up a global expertise with localized market intelligence and insights in 30 plus markets. And we've been delivering payment solutions and value-added services to governments from all the way from local, all the way up to federal over the past 60 years. And the best way for you to see, I think, the impact of these payments insights and how they can help local and city governments is through case studies. So we partnered with Kearney, the consulting firm, to publish a series of white papers earlier this year that delved deeper into that intersection of governments and payments. It was an extensive piece of work with over 40 expert interviews, extensive desktop research, and with the focus on best practices of how governments have used data in their day-to-day decision-making so far, and a forward-looking perspective of what's to come. So I've pulled out a couple of those case studies for you today, and I think there are two particular streams that are particularly useful and pertinent to local and city governments. The first of which is travel and tourism. So a little bit of context. As many of you know, tourism was hit really hard by the pandemic, and data has been a critical tool in understanding the current stage of play and where to go moving forward. Prior to the pandemic, the tourism sector directly contributed to 4.7%, almost 5% of the GDP globally. And that number dropped by 1.9% back in 2020. The number of international arrivals in 2020 also plunged by 73%. And that led to a reduction in 77% of revenue that was accounted for with tourism. So we have an example here that I think will bring this to life. So in 2020, the city of Gold Coast wanted to explore opportunities for economic growth. They wanted to promote their city's strengths, especially after the pandemic. So in partnership with Visa, we built out a transaction dashboard and a tourism dashboard that helped officials understand the flow of economic benefit. So where are visitors coming into? Where are they specifically spending on? And what is that impact, not just on the specific area or tourist destination, but also on the precincts around it? And that's really useful because they were then able to determine any changes in zoning, infrastructure decisions, as well as potential requirements that can enhance service provisions, not just for residents, but also for tourists and visitors. And so they've been able to understand the impact of specific events that are happening in the city, as well as broader impacts of specific tourist destinations. A similar such example is with the Singapore Tourism Board. So with the Singapore Tourism Board, we launched a report, again, on the impact of COVID-19, but with a specific focus on small and micro businesses. So small and micro businesses, or SMBs, are the backbone of the economy globally. And we were able to provide the Singapore Tourism Board with a targeted analysis on which areas in Singapore the SMBs were hit the hardest. And once we had that analysis, we were able to then help them act on it. So we created a Where You Shop Matters campaign that encouraged shopping at small and local businesses in specific areas. So those are just two examples of how payments insights specifically can help with better understanding what's going on in the tourism economy and how to support them better. So there's a second use case that I think is also useful here, and that is on urban planning and sustainability. So more than half of the world's population currently lives in cities, and that number is expected to go up to 68% by 2050. Cities consume also 2/3 of global energy, and they account for more than 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's imperative that urban planning in the future is both sustainable and resilient. And data can help us do that. So an example here is in the UK, Visa has a partner called Movement Strategies. Movement Strategies uses spend insights from Visa, telecom data, and footfall data to help cities better understand movement, spend, and dwell. And so one really pertinent example here is they were working with a local council to understand the impact of pedestrianization of a city high street. So the prevailing knowledge was that if we were to pedestrianize a street and remove all cars and vehicles from the street, it would bring commerce down. But using spend insights, they were actually able to test it over the period of a few weeks and determine that there was actually no significant impact to spend on the high street when that particular street was pedestrianized. And so by being able to use spend insights, they were bringing about a positive, sustainable impact for the city as well and for its residents. Similarly, actually, with Resilient Cities, we partnered on a Mi Movilidad project in Jalisco, in Mexico, and we created a digital open loop system for transit. And this actually increased the data that was there were a few benefits here. One was it allowed more citizens to be included and to use public transit. And the second piece was that the data that was available to transport operators as a result of making it more an open loop digital system enabled them to tailor all of their offers to economically or mobility disadvantaged inhabitants. This is another example of how data can help decision makers make more informed and evidence-based decisions. So now I know I'm running out of time here, but essentially, as we see digital payments skyrocketing, we have access to more and more insights on how people are spending, and that can provide huge value to governments and public sector. And of course, this needs to be underpinned by responsible data sharing practices. So you need to ensure that you have the right frameworks and policies in place. The data is depersonalized, de-identified, anonymized, or aggregated, and then be able to use those insights to improve citizen and resident outcomes. So I'm excited to hear more from the other panelists and to dive into a rich discussion after that.
Thank you, Tulsi, for an excellent and insightful presentation. Now we would go to Silvina de Giano, who would also give us a bit of what payment data and insights mean to Buenos Aires tourism. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this session, and thank you for the presentation, Nadine. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce Buenos Aires as a tourism destination. Buenos Aires is located in South America, and it is the capital city of Argentina. Before the COVID pandemic, we received 10 million tourists a year. This meant an income of 2,500 million from tourism spending, equivalent to the 3% of the GDP of the city. Since 2022, tourism has been recovering in the city, and we expect to finish this year with nearly the pre-pandemic levels of tourists. The Observatory, the Tourism Observatory, is part of the city's government, and we generate market intelligence to help orientate decision-making in tourism in the city. Great part of the information we produce at the Observatory is available on the Tourism Intelligence System. It's an open platform with free access for everyone interested in the information. Regarding the indicators, we use both traditional and unconventional data provided by public or private organizations. We are constantly looking for new sources of data to generate key information to guide effective data-driven decisions. We try to collect information about the different stages of a trip to analyze the consumer's journey. For example, previous to the trip, we try to collect information about flight searching and reservations, or hotel accommodations and rates online. At the moment of the trip, we have information about mobility from data from mobile phones or spending with credit and debit cards, among others. And after the trip, we collect a large amount of data, such as hotel occupancy, the number of tourists that arrive to the city, their profile, and the tourist reviews on digital platforms to know their experience in the city. Regarding the use of payment data, I would like to share with you our experience concerning the use of the data from tourists' credit and debit card spending, specifically only tourists' debit and credit card spending. Through an agreement with the provider, we access disaggregated data on the date of the week, the time of the consumption, the geographical location, and the consumption category. For example, if it is in accommodation, transport, gastronomy, shopping, entertainment, among others. We analyzed 50 consumption categories. With this information, we created a dashboard that is available on the Observatory's website, if you are interested. And what can we see in this dashboard? For example, we can see the monthly spending with credit and debit cards according to the traveler's origin, if they are international or national. We can see the age and gender profile, that's for nationals, on which categories they spend, how much each category represents of the total spending, when they consume, the date of the week and the time, and where they consume, the distribution of the spending in the different neighborhoods in the city. And what does this data source provide us? Well, first, it's a spending validation. We can compare the data from the cards spending with the information that we obtain through surveys. Second, it provides monthly spending estimation divided in categories. This information is crucial for tourism planning and marketing efforts and for understanding seasonal variations and preferences. Third, it offers insights into spending patterns on different markets, such as tourist countries in case of the internationals, tourists, or the provinces of origin in the case of domestic tourists. This data helps tailor marketing and strategies and services to meet the needs of diverse consumer segments. Fourth, by geolocation tourist spending and mapping its distribution across neighborhoods, it becomes possible to identify patterns in non-traditional areas, making targeted tourism promotion better. And five, by combining this information with other sources, such as mobility information, for example, we discovered neighborhoods with high tourist traffic, but low spending. And this leads to opportunities for developing strategies that boost tourism consumption in these areas. In summary, this data source may be a valuable tool not only for validating spending data that we have from surveys, but also gaining actionable insights. These insights promote better informed tourism strategies in the city. I hope to have contributed to the discussion that brings us together, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Silvina. It was a very beautiful contribution. I'm sure the participants as well agree. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, anything sparked your mind, please share it with us in the chat or in your questions in the Q&A box. And now we will move to Dr. Ahmad Giffari, who will share with us how Jakarta is using technology and payment data in their planning. Please, Dr. Ahmad, share your screen, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Nadine. Good morning, good evening, good everyone. This is a good chance for me to share what Jakarta's have done with the payment data transformation. I give the title From Cash to the Code. It means real that happened in Jakarta when the Jakarta government tried to set up the public transportation in Jakarta. When we talk about the resilience in city, I think Jakarta still have many challenge to pursuing what is the resiliency city at all, especially when we're thinking about improving in risk assessment. Jakarta has got the flood risk, and then we talk about ensure the urban planning to ensure the new infrastructure and development project, and also the data and technology and economic diversification that really has to improve to find Jakarta become the resiliency city. Next. And then as we know that at least government has a platform and data as a service. Yeah. So I think this is we actually want to follow what in the other word wants to say. And what at the first Jakarta has to do, we made the digital transformation, infrastructure, IT, digital technology, digital platform, and the digital group, and also the smart machine. Then one of the example related to the how to leverage the data is because we have the application that we call the Jakarta Satu. This is the spatial planning area that giving some GIS system, create the comprehensive digital maps and database for land use. It helps to the urban planning and zoning and also the land management. And also the digital zoning and land use plan. It is also accessible online for the developers, urban planner, and getting crucial information beside access for the online permit application. The other one, what we call that the Jakarta Public Service Application, is actually to leveraging what residential, the community can get access to the government services. For example, access the various governments such as taxes, obtaining permits, reporting issues, and also the cashless payment, integrated payment option, payment for taxes, utilities, and government fees. And then also the urban services. So this application is also powerful that many residential can log in using their identity numbers. And the other one, the things that what we call that the Jakarta has problems in terms of the transportation, the congestion that happened since 1950 until 2000, as we see in the picture, and then make the government thinking about how to revitalize the transportation issue in Jakarta. The next. So what to do? The government is finally established the state-owned enterprise in the provincial level to handle it, the congestion that happened in Jakarta. So this is, I think, the Transjakarta company. Yeah? This is the biggest operator in Asian, I think, because more than 4,000 bus coordinated by the company, and also the more than 250 routes that develop, and also the service coverage area almost 80% in area of Jakarta. What things that we can learn from Transjakarta's company as a big operator that from the start we are using the payment system at the first using the next one, the cash. Yeah. This is what we learned from the Transjakarta company. Cash, and then becoming ticket, and then through the e-wallet, and then finally using the application. So what we get from this transformation, from the cash to the code, yeah. This is showing the situation that our government gets so many information from getting the data, starting from the passenger or ridership through so many factors. The first one is convenience. Yeah, digital payment methods such as contactless card or mobile apps make it more convenient for the passengers to pay more their rides. Yeah. They no longer need to carry cash or worry about the exact change. And then the second one's efficiency. Yeah. Digital payments streamline the fare collection process, reduction, boarding time, and improving the overall efficiency of the Transjakarta system. This can lead shorter waiting times and then faster commutes for the passengers. The transparency, digital payment system over the transparent record of the transaction, yeah, making it easier to track and manage revenue. This is also help reduce the risk of fraud or mismanagement of funds. Data insight. The digital payment system can provide valuable data insight into passenger behavior and use patterns. So it means that when we want to expand our services, we can see from the data where the ridership very big, heaven, in which area in Jakarta. So finally, data insight can optimize the routes, and then optimize the schedule and also the service delivery. The other one is to reduce cash handling. Eliminating cash transaction can significantly reduce the operational costs associated with cash handling, including the security and counting expense. So actually the government now have a plan to make it more utilized about the data analytic that getting from the apps, because more I mean day to day the passenger or the ridership become more and more higher. So from the ridership, we can get so many information for determine the tariff, expand the routes, or making the schedule on time, and then also for the expansion for the how many bus that we can operate in a day. I hope that's all my share related to the leveraging payment data in government of Jakarta. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Yes, Luis, over
Thank-
to you for the discussion.
Thank you, Nadine. And thank you, Tulsi, Silvina, Ahmad. Very, very, very interesting presentations and insights. Now we're going to move on to a little panel discussion. But before we begin, let me remind you that please, if you have questions or comments, feel free to share them in the Q&A box. We will have a section with your questions after this panel discussion. So let's start with a question on reflecting how do you think, in your experience, this use of data payments can support to enhance and improve the lives of vulnerable communities? In your experience, how do we use data payments to uplift these marginalized communities in our cities through city planning? Maybe we can start with Tulsi.
Sure. Thanks, Luis. So I think there's a couple of points here. The first is, I think we'd all be remiss if we didn't talk about the importance of inclusion and what is actually included in the data that we collect. So when we're talking about payments data, we're only looking at, as Visa, what goes through a digital payments network. So those who are traditionally financially excluded, who use cash, we're not able to see any information on their behaviors or have a better understanding of what would be better use for them. And so we actually believe that financial inclusion into the digital fold is hugely important. And digital payments specifically can be an on-ramp to financial inclusion. So very often they're the first formal financial product that a person uses once they get a mobile phone, if they have a wallet and they're able to a mobile wallet and they're able to use that. And it's financial inclusion, it's a simple idea, right? It's that people and businesses can access a secure and convenient and affordable payment and any other financial services to meet their everyday needs and their long-term goals. But it's not easy, right? More than I think it's about half of the adult world today globally lives in an informal economy, and they deal exclusively in cash. And my colleagues here on the panel indicated how actually by switching from cash to digital, it provides not just convenience, but provides access to all kinds of government services and financial services that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. And so when we work with governments, we ensure that digital payments are accessible to everyone, so that when we then use data to make decisions, we are counting everyone, including those who have traditionally been financially included. So if we're looking at tourism's impact on small and micro businesses, if those small and micro businesses are accepting digital payments, we're able to see who is and who isn't excluded and what we can do to better support them. And similarly with urban transit, which was the other example, and urban planning, as we see who is using the urban transit systems from one point to another, where might we provide better services to those who are traditionally reliant on government services? And we're able to see that only when they're included in the digital fold.
Thank you, Tulsi. Silvina?
Thank you, Luis. In the case of tourism consumption, that is my area, I think it can be helpful in two ways. On the one hand, by identifying patterns and consumptions preference to develop tailored products and services for travelers that benefit these vulnerable populations. On the other hand, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, by combining data sources, we can detect opportunities for commercial development in neighborhoods or areas outside the city's traditional tourist corridor. This strategy is crucial in city planning to promote the integration of vulnerable populations and increase development opportunities for the city's residents.
Great. Ahmed, please.
Okay, I think this is happened in the government of Jakarta when we see that the marginalized or vulnerable communities in terms of the data related to the transport system. Yeah. So the first that we do is understand the travel patterns. Yeah. Payment data from the public transport system can provide insight into the travel pattern and behavior of the marginalized community. So this one can give the information to the government to help the city authorities, tailor the transportation services to better meet their needs. The first one like that. And then the second one, this is also happened in Jakarta, when we see, when we want to determine the fare structure, the affordable fare structure. So by analyzing the payment data, can reveal whether the marginal communities are disproportionately affected by the fare structure. It means adjustment can be made to make public transportation more affordable for those with the lower incomes. And then also the other one, the accessibility improvements. So from the data that we can highlight, this is also showing that we actually has the data such as inadequate bus stop or lack of the wheelchair accessibility, something like that. And then data-driven decision can lead to infrastructure improvement and then enhance access for all. Yeah. And the last one is subsidized targeting, because in Jakarta, at least any 13 groups, certain group got the subsidies to get the public transport. Yeah. So using the payment data to target subsidize or maybe to give discount for the public transport fare to those who need the most, such as low-income resident. This one is ensure that transportation remains affordable and accessible. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ahmad, and thank you, Tulsi and Silvina. I will pose the next question. So I would like to know, what are some of the best practices and innovations in data that you can share with us? So maybe you can tell us if you have seen any best practices in addressing the most pressing challenges, and what can be the key takeaways for cities who are just starting out on using payment data. So maybe you can just share from your experience, what are these best practices that you want everybody tuning in today to take away and learn from? Maybe we can do this the other way around. Maybe we can start with maybe Silvina, if you can share with us a bit.
No problem.
Ahmad,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, Irene. Okay, it's an interesting question. No, I think that every day there are opportunities for innovation when it comes to data. And the potential sources of information are growing in number, especially with unstructured or large big data, large data sets. And the challenge lies in identifying the potential of this data for decision making, because that's the important. So when it comes to data from payment methods, the challenges are the same than in case of any large data set. To ask the right questions to the data, to clearly defining objectives, identifying the level of detail useful for decision making. For example, in the case of Buenos Aires, we worked with 200 geographical zones and with 50 consumption categories, but we explore other alternatives that in the end were dismissed. But above all, I think that the principal challenge is having patience for trial and error, because when you work with data, this is very, very important till you find the right way to ask the data what you really need to know.
Beautifully said. Yeah. Tulsi, you would like to contribute to this question, please?
Sure. When I'm thinking about best practice, I think the best way to use data well is to think of the user at the center of it. So if we're looking in this case, it's citizen outcomes. If you measure your success by the success of citizen outcomes and the improvement in citizen outcomes, and have them at the center of your design process, I think that is a really strong best practice. And where we've seen that work the best is when governments and private companies worked well together. And there's an open dialogue and open collaboration between the two. And we think that it's not just one type of data. This webinar obviously is around payments data specifically, but to get a full snapshot of citizen outcomes, we're talking about vulnerable citizens. Spend insights only tell you part of the story. So if you're able to combine that with other types of information to help understand the full picture, you're able to then provide even better services. So an example of that is Oxfam has a program called Be Ready, where they use a whole range of indicators to help predict when a climate crisis is about to occur. So they're using sensory analysis, satellite imagery, trying to understand where a crisis is going to happen before it does. And then spend insights can be used to determine which are the most vulnerable populations who might need support before that happens. I think that's a really good example of using data not just from one source, but being able to combine it from various others. And of course, underpinning all of that is the importance of consent and responsible data sharing. So there has to be a very clear purpose for why you're using the data that you are. But then when you have that framework underpinning it, we're able to come up with some really innovative solutions.
Thank you, Tulsi. Ahmad, please tell us about your experience in Jakarta.
Yeah, I think that one application that I show at the first slide, there is Jaki. Jaki means how to bridging between the government with the resident, with the communities, because I think that one is our innovation, help the communities in all aspects, starting when they got the certificate of the birth, and then finding the permission, and then also response the complain about what government services doing. So through the application, it seems like they bridging what government want to give to the residents, and then the resident also got the what the community want to ask to to get the services from the government. So it's a kind of wonderful, so many things that community want to ask, and then government want to give as a services. I think that's what happened in Jakarta. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. And very interesting and very important what you're saying, the three of you, like the importance of integration and inclusion are qualities that are on the basis of building a resilient city. So thank you for that, for those insights. And now we'll hand it over to Nadine to guide us through the Q&A from the audience.
Yes, thank you. So we have more questions from our participants. One, you touched upon while you were talking about the best practices in the presentation on the challenges, but we have a question specifically asking what are these challenges, or what are the roadblocks to the success in data use within the local government, and how can you overcome it? If you can just address it very quickly, and maybe we start with Dr. Ahmad, and then we go to Tulsi, and then to Silvina.
Okay, thank you, Nadine. Yeah, in terms of that question, I think one of the challenging one is related to the silo data. I think. Can you imagine all department has the data, and then they do it, they use or they operate their data. So it seems like there is no integrated the data, silo data. Then what we should do to overcome this? Yeah, I think we need the kind of the united task or responsibility in the one responsible, and then it can spur all department using the same data without silo data. I think that's my point of view.
Sure, I'll pick up on that. I really like to echo what Ahmed said just now around data silos. I think there's definitely a challenge with the governments that we've been working with on data silos within government, and Ahmed just talked through that particular challenge and roadblock. But I think there's also a growing challenge of silos across jurisdictions, right? And when we're not able to see data flows across borders, the models that we create and the insights that we create are limited. And we think that having open data and data sharing frameworks that allow for free flow of data across borders actually, benefits not just will have a magnified benefit on the citizens who we're trying to create better services for. Underpinning that, and I know I've said this before, but I think it's vital, and that is the biggest roadblock perhaps, and that's trust from citizens on the use of their data. So during COVID, we also, as much as we saw an increase in use of data, we also saw escalating privacy and security concerns. And there was, understandably, a lack of trust in how corporations, governments use data that's very personal. And for that, I think there are a few things that we can do to address that challenge of trust, that roadblock of trust. One is transparency, and the second is empowerment of data use. So it's really important that we are clear that the citizens whose data it is, the cardholders, or in our case, it's their data. And they must have complete control of when their data is collected and shared, and they can explicitly provide or revoke consent. And we've created a range of consent mechanisms and consumer empowerment tools on that basis. But only when we make that clear and transparent will we see a more trustworthy consumer and citizen base. And we think that that's hugely important as we use more and more data to drive decision making.
Okay, I agree with both of you, what you have said. I think the main obstacles are, by one hand, to ensure the security in the use of data, as Tulsi said. Another important problem for us is the cost of accessing to the information. And the third problem, very important problem nowadays here in Argentina at least, is having the appropriate human resources profiles to handle these big data sets, for example, data scientists. How we can overcome with a framework in the case of the security of the data, as Tulsi said, how make a transparent process, what we do with the data, how we process the data, and those things. And about the rest of the problems, I think that private-public collaboration is the key to solve this problem. Not only private and public collaboration, collaboration with the universities too, in order to have the appropriate human resources we need to handle this kind of data.
Great, thank you for these insights. So we can say that data integrations and breaking the silos of data is one of these challenges. The data governance and how we build trust and how we make sure it's secure and it's transparent, and how we engage with the private sector, the public sector, and the civil society. And also we touch on the cost of data and the needed skills to make sure it is a successful process. So all these are really important to highlight, and thank you for this. I hope it answered the question. And now I will go to another question from our participants. They're asking on how and if do you use the data for predictive analytics for strategic planning? So if you have a specific experience with that, please do share it with us. Tulsi, would you like to touch on this? And then we go to Silvina and then to Dr. Ahmad.
Sure. So at Visa, I guess the biggest use of data and AI tools, which essentially helps with predictive analytics, is around fraud detection. That is the core of our business. If to ensure that the payments that flow through are done so securely. And so we're able to use data through our AI tools to help determine if a particular transaction might be fraudulent. So is it you that's performing this transaction? We're able to see from the past the types of transactions that you've done and make an educated assumption on whether or not a transaction in the future is one that makes sense for you as a consumer, as a cardholder, or it might be somebody else. So that's the biggest use of predictive analytics for us as a company. I think when it comes to economic insights and insights for cities, we're careful in talking about the predictive nature, right? COVID is a perfect example of how we couldn't actually use past behavior to predict what would happen in the future, because it was this big shock to the economy and fundamentally changed how we behave. A lot of folks are still working from home. Commuter cities are now no longer getting those residents coming in. And so instead of thinking of it in terms of predictive analytics, we look at what's happening more real time and are able to help governments make decisions in the here and now.
Exactly, that's as you said, Tulsi. We do not use this information exactly for predictive or in sense of the predictive analytics. We use data, as I said, to understand potential tourist development in neighborhoods, for example, with high tourist influx but low consumption, but not in terms of predictive analytics. I don't have anything to share about past experience using the data in this sense?
Great, thank you. Dr. Ahmad, any comments on this question?
Yeah, related to the predictive analytic data, I think most the city using that one when they are starting formulating the vision of the city, because as we know that when we're thinking about 20 years after, so we have to make the forecasting, population, and then zoning, and then the tax, the revenue of the local government. So finally, the zone that we will create, or the vision that we will create, finally could fulfill the what the residential get. Yeah. As a government, I think one of the task is how to make the welfare of the community or the residential. So they have to make sure what the plan for the 20s after finally can support have enough to fulfill what the resident wants, social, economic, and then the education, health, and also the spatial planning surrounding. So activity, economic activity can create in the 20s after, for example, and then make it welfare for the residential.
Yeah.
I think that's my point of view.
Great, thank you for sharing that. I would ask if you have any last reflections, comments from Tulsi, Silvina, Dr. Ahmad that you would like to share with us that was not addressed in the presentation or the questions. Please do share it with us. And yeah, and if not, I will hand over to Louise. But before I do that, I would really thank you again for all these great insights. And I will hand over to Louise to wrap up this session.
Thank you, Ahmad, Silvina, Tulsi, for sharing your experience and your insights and reflections. This has been very, very interesting. And thank you to everyone who joined. Remember that the recording will be available on Resilient Cities Network website. And you're also invited to join us to the next session. In the next session, we will discuss and hear about social justice, civil unrest, and building resilient communities. This will happen in September 28th. You are all invited. And thank you again. Have a good rest of the day and see you soon.